Well, here we are again. Let's see, whatever video this is, 10, 11. Anyway, I would say back to the grind, but this isn't a grind. This is I don't know, it's just fun for me. Um, I get to cover uh, my first trip to NAU and the shenanigans that Downbeat has, and finish it with one of those nights that, teenagers get to have every once in a while where everything sort of falls into place and that for me, in my mindset at the time didn't really happen a lot. Um, because I was still this guy who thought of himself as a wallflowerish, just lucky to be around the people he was, guy. Um, so here we go. Let me be the one you call. If you jump, I'll break your fall. The January choir concert with the middle school was a chance for Sarah and I to perform on the same stage, as she was with the Centennial Middle School 8th grade choir. It was a shorter concert than usual, but still one that, deserved the time warp, much to Sarah's chagrin. The middle school choir did a small selection of songs like Wade in the Water and How Can I Stop Singing My Song before each of Mountain Point's choirs did a song of their own. Downbeat, of course, brought out Java Jive, and a cappella closed the show with two songs. This was both a showcase for the Centennial Choir, but it was also used as a bit of a recruiting tool for Mountain Point, showing what high school choir would or could be like and to convince students to continue with the performing arts. Sarah didn't need too much convincing. She was already set to join choir because she had seen how much fun I had been having. I was looking forward to the upcoming trip to Northern Arizona University and the NAU Jazz Madrigal Competition. Downbeat historically would travel up there to compete, and with the group we had, we were sure we would do well. There was still some looming tension with Blaine and Katie, though, and as the weeks went by, I would be updating Adrian on all the goings on through letters. I would tell her about my growing excitement toward the big tour at the end, my current dating prospects, which, to be clear, were very rare and very few. I received a letter from her toward the end of the month. I am going insane. I'm thinking I would rather face an army of the undead. Now is when you should ride in on your horse and rescue me, she wrote me, which admittedly made me laugh. I decided that would be a goal, to somehow rescue Adrian from the boredom she was feeling, or at least the exasperation of being in Kansas and away from all of us. I immediately took to writing a follow up letter while I continued to read. She had noted that she was going to try and visit Arizona the second week of February, which was exciting to hear. However, after talking to Emily during our third hour German class, this prospect was seeming unlikely. Adrian wrote me a letter saying she was going to try and be here for coronation, I said. She was, but I don't think that was going to happen, Emily responded. Oh? I said, surprised. Last time I talked with her, she said some things came up and she wasn't going to be able to come out, Emily said, mentioning that she'd been writing or calling Adrian too, and how they were just both so disappointed. I didn't hide my disappointment either, and it just reinforced my goal someday to bring her home for a visit. Going into February, there was a bit of flurry of activity between Blaine and Katie. They broke up and then they got back together in like the span of a couple of days, and things were just murky. But whatever drama was going on there, I didn't want to be part of it. I continued to work for it to not bleed into my life while trying to be more present for others. Emily had recently lost her horse and had asked if I was free to hang out. So we spent a couple of afternoons and evenings together to help her process. We'd watch movies, get coffee, we'd go for walks. The coronation dance was scheduled for the night that we were coming back from NAU, an absolute horrible timing of the calendar. With this in mind, I hadn't asked anyone to go with me, though Emily was the top of that list, since we'd gone the year before and I still had a healthy sized crush on her. It seemed, though, that our friend group was just thinking of meeting up and going to the dance altogether. Though, some crushes with, you know, people would just kind of gravitate toward each other and go as dates. I spent a lot of my time on the phone with friends while packing for NAU, and in one of our calls, I did ask Emily to save me a dance should I make it back to Coronation. I also asked the same of Aaron and Meg, as my friendship with them had grown to a point I wanted to share a memory with each of them as well. Emily gave Blaine and I an invitation to her after coronation party, so if we couldn't make the dance, we'd at least be sure to make the party. While packing for NAU continued, I debated throwing my journal into the bag, as I'd really been diligent in my journaling that December, both to help me process, but also to keep a record, to someday later read. Instead, I threw in a mini cassette voice recorder my parents bought me for Christmas, which I had transitioned to at times to archive my thoughts. The day we set off for NAU was like any other Thursday. We dropped off our bags at the choir room and went through the normal school day. At the end of the day, Emily and I met up after our last class and we made our way to the performing arts lobby. As we turned the corner to go down the steps to the first floor, I stopped, dead in my tracks. There, before me in the hallway, stood Adrian. Emily cheered and immediately ran up and gave her a big ol' hug. I stood there in shock like an idiot. "Well, aren't you gonna hug me?" Adrian asked, smirking, with her hand on her hip. "Well, yeah," I said, my brain recovering from the initial shock as she and Emily stood side by side, motioning me forward. I hugged Adrian, surprised and overjoyed to see her there. "Wait, I thought you weren't going to make it." Emily laughed. She was in on the surprise, and Adrian's smile had said it all. Emily and her explained that they had come up with an idea telling everyone she wouldn't be able to make it, when in reality, she'd always planned to be there. She not only had planned to make it back for the visit, she was going to be there for the dance. Adrian was back, and now I was leaving. It was then I knew I had to make it back in time. Come hell or high water, I'd run home from Flagstaff if I had to. I didn't feel like there was any other choice. Emily, Adrian, Xandar, and others joined Downbeat in the auditorium lobby to see us off. I kept trying to positively remind myself we would be back in time on Saturday, that we'd see the group at the dance, and if not, we would at Emily's house. As I got ready to get in the van for NAU, Emily stopped me, walking up and touching my arm. I turned to her and she handed me an envelope, gave me one more hug, wishing me luck. I promised to try and make it back for the coronation, even if it was just for a short time. I had every intention of making it back for that one saved dance. Blaine climbed into the van next to Katie, and I took the far back seat. Diana, Laura, David, and Pam also rode in our van. Mr. Werner, the band director, was our driver, and as we drove, I switched between chatting with friends and listening to REO on my CD player. As I did, I opened up the letter from Emily. "Dear Matt, I heard a song and thought of you. You've always told me that you were there for me, and you always have been. You're one of my dearest, closest, and best friends. Love always and forever, Emily. P.S. Best of luck at NAU." Also included were the handwritten lyrics to Savage Garden's Crash and Burn. I was very touched reading the lyrics, and once finished, I slid the letter into my CD wallet with my REO Journey and Styx CDs and her zombie CD. I could feel a burst of adrenaline, butterflies in my stomach, and the smile on my face that was forming. I couldn't hide it. Blaine looked over from sitting with Katie and arched an eyebrow. "We've got to make it back for coronation," I said, that little bit of determination behind the statement. "You got it, bro," Blaine responded. "Going down, party time. My friends are going to be there too." After the 2.5 hour drive, we finally rolled into the parking lot of the Embassy Suites in Flagstaff, unloading our stuff and heading to our respective rooms. The base section all roomed together, and with only 2 beds in our room, Blaine and Nathan pulled seniority rank and claimed the bedroom by throwing their bags in there and stretching out. David and I, not looking to argue and realizing being a senior does have its perks, we took the pull-out couch. I took off for a walk, running into Diana and voice journaling on my tape recorder as I did. I noticed Blaine had kissed his ex-girlfriend Jen on the cheek, and I was trying to figure that out, talking as I walked. Katie was still pining over him and their gray area relationship, and Katie would be sure to voice any confusion or displeasure to me. After making my rounds through the hallway, I stopped to get ice and stocked up on root beer and Dr. Pepper for the guys from a machine on the first floor. We all had dinner and free time before turning into our rooms for the night, and the guys of the base section stayed up late watching movies before calling it a night. As the 6 a.m. alarm went off in the morning, I handed Blaine a bottle of his soda of choice and cracked open my root beer. We threw on our downbeat tuxes for our madrigal classical portion of the competition, and I put Emily's letter in the interior pocket of my jacket, close to my heart. Blaine noticed, and he seemed to have a knowing grin that something was up. "You want to talk about it?" he asked. "Emily wrote me a letter before we left." "And?" Blaine asked, a little bit of interest peeking, his grin getting a little bit bigger. "It's a nice letter. We'll call it a good luck charm from my queen." Blaine nodded, understanding. "Good to see you smile, bro. Seriously." "And Time Warp, you gonna do that too?" "Yes, I am," I happily replied. Blaine laughed. A jump to the left and a step to the right later, we were out the door with David and headed to breakfast. After breakfast at the hotel, we used a meeting room for practicing our selections of music. The competition, Downbeat sang a selection of music we'd already performed at a concert, as was customary for competitions. Receiving critique in front of an audience was a first for me, a definite learning experience. And after we wrapped up our singing, we ran back to the hotel to change before heading out to Sedona for lunch and to visit the Chapel of the Holy Cross, a Catholic church built in the side of the Red Rock Mountains. Blaine and I caught a ride with Wendy this time, leaving shortly behind Mr. Werner and the other half of the choir. As we pulled up to McDonald's, though, Blaine burst into laughter, getting my attention. "That is frightening," he said, pointing out the window. Standing outside of the play area at McDonald's, waving like an automatic attraction, was Mr. Werner, an evil grin across his face. Blaine and I laughed and waved back. Werner never broke character. "That is fantastic, Mr. Werner," I said, getting out of the van and passing him on the way inside the restaurant. "Greetings, choir boy," he responded. The name he always called me. Mr. Werner was cool as hell. For Halloween, he dressed as Jafar from Aladdin and never broke character, just walking through the school with a staff and a Iago plush sewn into his costume. Werner would say things to me like, "The intermingling of choir and my band and orchestra is upsetting. Understood, choir boy?" I would love to play to it with mock fear, and maybe a little bit of real fear. As someone who never made the crossover into band or orchestra, I never got to know him as well as I wanted to, but what friends in the band told me, they all loved him, and my limited interactions with him, I could totally see why. Blaine and I sat for lunch. Katie and Pam joined us, with Katie wanting to talk to Blaine about their relationship. while Pam and I tried to keep things light. I felt like Pam and I were stuck in the middle, and we found a bit of camaraderie in that. We were always friends and had great conversations with one another and would sometimes share with each other some of the absurdity we found between two of our close friends. We ate, got back on the road, heading up to the chapel. This had always been a special stop and a rite of passage for Downbeat. Ludwig had taken previous Downbeats through the years and it was always a favorite stop of so many that came before me. As we ascended the ramp to the chapel, Katie asked to take my picture outside. I remember laughing because I almost sat on a swarm of bees for the picture. When she got the picture developed, she put it in a frame and gave it to my parents. This is the perfect picture of Maddie, she told them. They've kept that in that frame they've had upstairs in the hallway ever since. And even my self deprecating ass was, to be honest, it really is a good picture of me. With permission from the church, we were allowed to sing inside the chapel. Looking out a giant glass window out into nature, we stood in a circle and sang Adoramus Te, a beautiful classical piece that I would always enjoy singing with downbeat. The acoustics of the chapel allowed the song to ring, and people that were there listened as we sang, and everyone taking in both the sound and the visual. While in the moment I didn't capture the full force of what it meant to me at the time, I knew it was going to be such an important memory later on. Choir had been creating a truly wonderful group of friends, but through all our turmoil and triumphs so far, this moment with Downbeat just felt different. The place, the people, the song, all brought together a feeling of family. When it was over, we spent a moment of silence just looking out the beautiful picture window at the majestic Red Mountain Range. We took a couple of photos as a choir, one of all of us together, and one of just the seniors. And this seemed to touch Wendy. When you all graduate, I hope you all visit me and share with me your families, she said. And once you've graduated, please call me Wendy. On our way back to the hotel, Blaine and Katie sat together. I listened to REO, and we were told to try and rest up before the host concert, where we would see an all-male ensemble named Chanticleer perform. To my annoyance, when we got back, our quote-unquote rest was replaced with a 45-minute jazz practice, and afterwards I walked the halls to clear my head and record more of my audio journal before we rushed off to dinner at a local Chili's. As dinner wore on, the choir tried to get Wendy to sing Elvira by the Oak Ridge Boys, since she had previously bragged a lot about singing it at karaoke. She, however, emphatically declined the invite. Singing songs in public was not something we had trouble doing, and if there was a chance to perform or entertain, we choir folk were happy to oblige. We could play off conversations that would remind us of songs. We could walk arm in arm through the hallways at school or through a parking lot singing whatever came to mind. Blaine and I would play off his love of the Backstreet Boys and sing while walking through a blockbuster looking for a horror movie. You know, as Rush sings, all the world's indeed a stage, and we are merely players, performers, and portrayers, each another's audience outside the gilded cage. And in choir, we always felt happy to entertain the audience who found themselves around us. We piled into our van and off to the concert hosted by NAU. The concert began like any other. But it was when the countertenors began to sing, all the guys looked at each other with a wait, what the fuck look on our faces. They have higher registers than the girls do, David said, looking over. I don't think I could sing that high if you kicked me in the nuts with a steel-toed boot, Blaine said. I'd be willing to take you up on that bet, I replied, and Blaine laughed, knowing I would have called his bluff. Seriously, though, how? Said one of our tenors. We sat a bit awestruck, and our reactions must have drawn some humor from the ladies of the choir. After the concert, Wendy instructed us to turn in for the night after the long day. Blaine and I raided the soda machine one more time, and everyone said their good nights before what was going to be our final day there in Flagstaff. Blaine and Nathan went into the room, while David and I turned on the TV before pulling the bed out of the couch. We thought we were in for some much needed rest. And then the phone rang. He better find the one he's going to take on the run before it runs him down. Hello? I said, picking up the phone. Matt, open the door, I heard Jen K on the phone. Wait, what? Matt, Katie's on the way to your room to talk to Blaine. Open the damn door, she said with a little bit of urgency. Not mad, but urgent. Wendy had instilled a bed check curfew saying anyone caught outside could be subject to discipline, including expulsion from downbeat. So I figured Jen was trying to make sure there was no knocking on our door to arouse suspicion. I had a feeling that if Katie was coming in this late, it wasn't a friendly visit, and we needed to be prepared for the worst. I hung up the phone. David, get the door. Blaine, Nathan, we've got incoming. David opened the door, and Katie stormed into our room, past him and into Nathan and Blaine's room, slamming the door behind her. We couldn't hear the details, but Katie's voice was elevated enough we could tell she was starting to yell at Blaine. After a few seconds, Nathan walked out of the bedroom in a pair of shorts. He sat down in the chair next to the couch, shaking his head in both irritation and disbelief, mixed with a little bit of a look of someone who just got woken up after just falling asleep. We decided to watch From Dusk Till Dawn 2 while listening to the yelling that was coming from the other side of the door. What's going on? David asked. I don't know, but let's give it a minute, Nathan responded. We kept watching the movie, keeping an eye on the door. Unbeknownst to us, outside our door were Jen, Miriam, and Becky, trying to listen and hoping to find out why Katie was so upset. Across the hall, Diana, Laura, Tamara, and Jen G heard the commotion, popped their heads out into the hallway to see what was going on. After listening to 45 minutes of muffled voices, I couldn't take it anymore. Honestly, what the fuck? I asked. I am going to bed. She can deal. Night, guys, Nathan said as he got up from the chair and walked into the bedroom. He said, sternly, motioning for her to leave, Okay, Katie, that's enough. Leave us alone. Go back to bed. Katie left in a huff, and I walked into the bedroom. There, Blaine sat on the edge of the bed with a defeated look on his face. Nathan looked at me. You can try and figure it out, he told me, but I want to go to bed. Blaine got up from where he was sitting and asked, You got a second? I nodded, and we went out to the couch. I walked over to the fridge, getting drinks for us, as he sat down. With the horror movie still playing in the background, Blaine offered his bed to David so we could talk. David gave thanks, headed to the bedroom, and shut the door behind him. I, meanwhile, leaned up against the wall, a moment of silence before us before I spoke. Okay, so what the fuck happened? I asked. I may have screwed up, he replied. Well, like kissing Jen G earlier, I followed up. It was on the cheek, but yeah, he said. What happened? So, you know how Katie and I have been seeing each other? I uh had never really broken it off with Jen. I was still leaning up against the wall when I heard this, and I looked at Blaine, shaking my head. With everything going on, with all of our talks afterward, I'd been pretty straightforward on what I think he should have done. Maybe how I thought I would handle things if in that position. I would like to say I was surprised. Hearing it, the news didn't come to me as that much of a shock. Are you serious? Come on, bro. Really? I said I almost started to laugh. It's dumb. and I called it off with both of them like a while ago. I cut it off with Jen first, then Katie like a week ago, but she's been all over me and telling me she loves me and everything. Okay, I said, pushing myself off the wall and throwing my finished bottle into the trash can. And but now Katie found out I'd never stopped dating Jen while I was dating her. Oh, you idiot, I replied. I know, he said, taking a drink and looking down. I shook my head. No, I don't think you do. Listen, man, you can't do that. Like how is anyone going to trust you? I know that's why I couldn't do it anymore. Blaine looked frustrated about it all. His part in it, maybe about getting caught, and maybe just being right back in the situation of talking things out. After everything between you and me, and I didn't want to hurt anyone else, I really didn't, and I don't feel the same way Katie does. It's becoming a lot. And Jen and I have been together for a long time, but I'm over that too. He sat and stared into space for a moment. I felt like there was something to be said about trying to have your cake and eating it too, but I also wasn't exactly in the mood to watch Blaine suffer. He made mistakes, he had been selfish, but he was my brother, and I always tried to see the good in him. Okay, I'm not covering for you. You screwed up, and that's on you. I can help you deal with whatever's going to happen next, but holy shit, never again. If I find out you do something like this ever again, I'm going to have to kick your ass myself, and I won't pull my punches. You got it? I said. Yeah. Blaine and I were up talking until about 4 a.m. the next morning, and with only 2 hours before wake-up calls, we needed sleep. When the alarm went off at 6, we rolled off the pullout and dove right into getting into our tuxes. As David and Nathan stepped out of the bedroom, Blaine and I finished another soda, planning to hit the machine again on the way down to breakfast. You guys good to go? David asked. We nodded. Always, I said, with a grin and misplaced teenage confidence. After breakfast, we practiced our jazz selection. The tension and looks the choir exchanged were palpable. I remembered then even finding how humorous it seemed to me, which admittedly can be petty sounding, but it just was. Whatever had gone on between the two of them, now Katie and Blaine had to deal with the fallout and hurt, and here I was in a conference room, standing in a circle, watching Katie stare at Blaine, who hid behind his sunglasses. As we got ready to go out to perform, it started to snow, and we piled into the vans. Katie tried to sit by Blaine, but I cut her off using the excuse that Blaine and I had a baritone part that we had to work out. Meanwhile, Diana, the unspoken caretaker of our group, told everyone to put on their seatbelts, and as our van fishtailed around a snowy corner, Becky nearly flew out of her seat and onto the floor of the van because she hadn't listened. Author's note: always listen to Diana. We arrived and did our jazz set, including the infamous and oversaying Java Jive, and after taking professional pictures, along with some funny ones, we made our way back to the hotel to pack up and get ready to go home. I walked the halls of the hotel one last time after lunch before we headed back to NAU to hear NAU's choir perform to close out the event. As we made our way to the vans and in the middle of the snow, a snowball fight broke out. Everyone was a target, Wendy and Werner included. We surrounded Wendy's van, waiting for her to get out, and, to her credit, after some stalling, she did step out, becoming the target for over a dozen snowballs. In touch with my humor of being a Midwestern small town kid, and the cold didn't bother me, I was wearing a pair of jeans and a short sleeved t shirt, so Diana asked me to wear a jacket. I politely declined, only to then take a basketball sized snowball to the back, thrown by Blaine and Nathan. After the choir let off some of our steam with our snow war, we piled into the vans and went to the concert. Katie still tried to talk to Blaine, but Blaine remained as firm as he could that things were over and he was moving on. On the drive back to Phoenix, I slipped on One Too Many Girlfriends by REO Speedwagon and chuckled to myself. We were headed home. We were going to have time to make it to Coronation, and I had some promises to keep. Spare a little candle. Save some light for me. Blaine and I got back to Mountain Point at 6 p.m., roughly an hour and a half or so before the dance started. And as soon as we got off the van, we grabbed our bags, threw them into the back of his Geo, and took off. Blaine had tried to get Katie had tried to get Blaine's attention, but we were off. We ran by my house and threw my bags into my room, said hi to my parents. I grabbed a black button-up shirt off of a hanger. On the way out, I told my parents I'd be home after the party at Emily's, and they countered with a curfew. Latest, 2 a.m., because they knew if we were watching a movie, it could take a little while. They then handed me a little bit of money for pictures or food, and Blaine and I were on our way. When we got to Coronation, I turned to Blaine as we pulled into the parking lot. You have to tell her, I said. He looked at me with a puzzled look and then realized I was speaking about Adrian. It's been a hell of a weekend, bro, Blaine said, putting his chin to his hand as he rested his elbow on the window. I don't give a shit, I said abruptly. She's back for a couple of days, and I know it's been a hell of a weekend. I am not saying that you need to jump into a relationship here. I'm just saying maybe be honest if you still have a thing for her. At least let's make sure she has a good night. While Blaine's recent treatment of women left something to really be desired, I knew he had a good heart. After corresponding with Adrian for over the last few months, I knew it would make her trip back extra special to know that there were people who cared for her and missed her. Coupled with that, what I believe that could be some feelings Blaine had for her and maybe her for him. I also had that bit of hopeless romantic in me, that this change of heart that he was having wasn't just something I'd been wishing for, but something he might be actively doing. I didn't want Adrian to be just another crush, but I also wasn't a fan of things being left unsaid. So I tried to balance both that and Blaine's behavior, hoping for the best possible outcome. A night where maybe everyone could be happy. Blaine nodded and opened the car door. As we walked up to the front of the school, we met the group of Adrian and Aaron and Corey, Meg, Kristen, Zan, and Emily alongside Mark C. Mark Mark was someone I always saw as this bit of a rival when it came to the romantic attention of our mutual female friends. Looking back on it now, I know we very well could have just been in a similar situation, trying to figure out how to navigate those relationships. I've been since told by a mutual friend that Mark and I weren't all that different, and probably really could have been friends had it not been for an immature sense of macho competitive competition. Which, let's be clear, I am happy to take that blame on. We're going to chalk that up to teenage insecurity. The night started with hugs all the way around, and I was happy I hadn't missed the chance to be there with all of them. The dance, as most high school dances are, was a flurry of activity from rushing off to get a spot in line for the photographer to getting out on the dance floor. Blaine and Adrian immediately paired off. Meg and Kristen were dancing, Aaron, Corey, and Xandar were off as well, which gave me a chance to cash in on that dance with Emily right at the start of the night. Dressed in a dress with a black top and a purple skirt, she put her arms around my neck. I put mine on her hips, and we danced. I thanked her for the letter she gave me, and she said she was glad I liked it, reinforcing that the song was a reminder of me. Even then, right at the beginning of the dance, it had made the night memorable. When the slow song ended, the DJ started playing a swing dance song, and Erin ran up and asked me to dance. With my dance background and her eager willingness, Erin and I would swing dance at every school dance together. I swung her around, spinned and dipped her, laughing all the way, and when it was over, she gave me a hug, both of us out of breath from both the laughing and dancing. Reuniting with Emily, we looked around and saw the perfect photo opportunity right there on the dance floor. A huge group of us were to get all together. And so we decided time for a group photo to be taken. We made our way over to the photographer and had it taken. And it was, for a very long time, it was one of two photos that I knew of that night, that I knew about. And it captured all or most of the most important people I cared about in that one photo. Blaine had his arm around Adrian. Aaron and Emily sat linking arms with me and Zan behind them. Corey had this like smoldering look, and Meg was all smiles. After the picture was back to dancing, I danced with Meg while Aaron and Emily headed to the restroom for a minute to fix a dress that had torn on the dance floor. When Blaine took a break to chat with friends and a slow song played, I walked up to Adrian. Want to dance go? I asked, leaning up against the table, my hands in my pockets and my smirk, as she called it. She smiled and nodded, and we took to the floor. She asked how NAU went, and I filled her in on the drama of what had happened while we were there. Drama with Blaine and Katie. I'm not surprised, she said. Yeah, well, she's not here, so, you and him should be safe, I said, teasing. She rolled her eyes. What's going on with you and Emily? She asked, changing the subject. Nothing really, I shrugged. Are you still crushing? Adrian gave me a knowing smirk, and I nodded. Yeah, she wrote me a letter before NAU, and I kept it with me the whole trip like a dork. But she's here with Mark, isn't she? I asked, remembering that I'd seen them standing together when we arrived. No, Adrian shook her head. I was a bit surprised. What? Matt, when you guys left for NAU, she and I hung out and we got to talk. And she missed you the entire time you were up there at NAU, she mentioned, a little slyly. Oh, it was all I could say to keep my cool, and I was failing. You may have liked me once. You may have liked Katie, but no matter who you've liked, the constant's always been Emily, Adrian reinforced. I smiled. Adrian was an excellent wing woman. After our dance ended, we walked back over to Blaine. Emily and Aaron returned from the bathroom, and Adrian gave me a nudge and a wink. And as she did, I felt arms wrap around my neck. Adrian snapped a photo, a copy of which she included later in the letter, of Emily and I. You want to dance? I asked, turning to face her and taking her hands. I'd love to, Emily answered, and hand in hand we took to the dance floor. The next dance was ours, next one, and the next one. In fact, we spent the rest of the evening dancing with each other, including a moment when the song itself from the letter she wrote me began playing. And my internal writer laughed at the timing. The letter and the song I kept with me as a good luck charm, and the girl forever tied to it, dancing with me in the moment. You're coming over, right? She asked as the evening came to an end with the final shared slow dance. Yeah, I'll be there, I said, no doubt in my mind. On the way to the parking lot, Emily linked arms with me and we walked through the school. We jumped in the back seat of the Geo with Blaine and Adrian in the front and we drove over to Emily's house. As she unlocked the door and let us in, we were soon joined by Meg, Corey, Aaron, and a couple of others, and we all piled into her living room. Blaine and Adrian got into a chair together, others onto the couch, and I sat on the floor where, after turning on The Princess Bride, Emily laid down on the floor with a blanket and put her head in my lap. She took my hand, and my heart jumped. What Adrian had said while we had danced was still ringing in my brain, and in the moment, everything just felt perfect. The group watched and, more accurately, quoted the film all the way through, laughing the entire time. As the night continued on, Emily and I had our own running commentary about our friends. Nothing malicious, but finding Adrian and Blaine's flirting a little obvious, at least to us. As Emily and I whispered back and forth to each other about Adrian and Blaine, the two of them, it seemed, had some comments of their own that they wanted to make, which I wrote down in my journal later. You know, you guys look really cute together, Blaine teased from across the room. Yeah, you two would be really good together. Date, be boyfriend and girlfriend, Adrian added, ever the wing woman. I had a hard time containing my own smile, and I thought I even caught a small grin from Emily. As the movie came to an end, though, Adrian got up to leave the party. She had a day or so before she had to head back to Kansas, but this was going to be the last time I'd have a chance to see her. The group gave her hugs, and she kissed me on the cheek. I promise, I'll get you out of Zombieland someday, I said, hugging her again. It's always great to see you, gorgeous one. I said it, making a point to look in her eyes when I did. You are great for my ego, she laughed. Keep writing me. Of course, I said as we walked her out the door. After Adrian left, we all settled back down to watch Silence of the Lambs. It was about an hour out from curfew, and Blaine and I made eye contact. So, do you want to head out too, bro? Blaine asked. I was having too much fun. I hadn't realized what time it was until just that moment. Time was just flying by, once again, becoming a bit of my enemy. I knew I'd be pushing it, staying out after curfew, but at the moment it felt like the risk I had to take. I knew that whatever flack my parents could dish out, I'd be more than happy to deal with. I shook my head to Blaine's questions. No, I'm good. You? Blaine chuckled. It felt like he could hear my internal dialogue. I'm good if you are. As we started the movie, Emily and I noticed Erin moving closer to Blaine. The two of them seemed to get cozy, and Erin at one point put her head in Blaine's lap, and he looked at me slightly puzzled. I arched an eyebrow, curious of this new development, and I felt Emily squeeze my hand. Erin's got a crush on Blaine, Emily whispered as I looked down at her. Oh, I said back, and I laughed internally because this guy couldn't fail with girls, ever. When the movie was over, Blaine and I got up to leave. The group all gave hugs to one another. Emily walked Blaine and I to the door. Blaine made his way to the car, giving Emily and I a moment as she stepped outside with us. Thanks for having us over, I said, rocking back on my heels. Thanks for coming, she responded. And that was when Emily leaned in and kissed me. For that moment, everything stopped. I've heard people use the phrase time stood still, but this moment defined it for me. I had already felt like the night had been perfect, but this cemented it, and I couldn't contain my surprise as the kiss ended. What was that for? I asked. Immediately, my brain screamed why I would even ask that fucking question. Idiot. Emily smiled one of her beautiful smiles and whispered, You've been really sweet. I had a really great time with you tonight. I had a great time with you too, I whispered back. I'll see you on Monday. Good night, Emily said as she stepped inside. Night, I responded, and she closed the door. I was still floating as I turned around and walked toward Blaine, my hands in my pockets. Blaine, his arm resting on the top of his car, gave me a brotherly grin. What? I asked, and he shook his head as his grin got bigger. What? Nothing, bro. You gonna be in trouble? Blaine asked. Probably. I nodded. Was it worth it? Every fucking minute. Blaine laughed as we got in and my brother started the car and pulled away from Emily's. Knowing I was already screwed, we didn't rush back as we headed back to my house. I was gonna be in trouble, but was perfectly determined to make the most of what time gave to me that night, spending it with the people I cared for the most. That entire weekend and that night, I knew then how important it was to me. I'd felt like I was coming out of a cocoon, inspired by a downbeat that was so fun and influential and wild. It was 16 kids and the drama that goes with it, our memories and snowball fights and songs. And then making it back to the dance with my heart pounding and spending it with almost every single person who was important in my life at that moment. It all played out like the perfect high school weekend I could have hoped for, and it ended the way it absolutely fucking had to. I was always the straight-laced, never in trouble kid. When Blaine finally dropped me off at home, it was 4 a.m., 2 hours after curfew, and kumbaya were my parents ticked, and I would face the consequences, but I was fine with it. They could have set me on fire. I didn't care. It was a small price to pay for what ended up being one of my favorite nights and lasting memories in all of high school. And that wraps us up for this video. Uh, it's just one of those ones of when I think about it, I can just you remember like the electricity and the feel and the everything. And for those of you who went to Mountain Point, you can just remember what that like cafeteria looked like when the lights were dark and just everything weirdly about it. Um, yeah, that was this. And from here on out, I really do start feeling like that wallflower me really just starts to break a bit. And then I get to have a new set of adventures. But that's a story for another time. So until then, thanks for watching or listening. Be good to yourself and keep on rolling.